Hello and welcome back. Let's write another bar chart. This one is also from IELTS Academic 13. I will walk you through some steps to make it easier to write a good essay for these kind of questions or these kind of graphs, let's say. All right, step one is to read and understand the statement. All right, let's read it together. The bar chart below shows the top 10 countries for the production and consumption of electricity in 2014. So it is a static chart. It means it doesn't show change over time. It's just for one specific point. And it shows electricity production and consumption. Consumption means use and usage. All right, as you know, we have two tasks to do. One, to summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features only. It means you cannot write every single point from the graph. And also you need to make comparisons where relevant, which is almost always relevant. And in doing so, you need to write at least 150 words. All right, step two, we need to understand the data and plan before writing. All right, let's look at the data together. We have the countries 1 to 10 on the left, from China and the United States at the top to the least, Korea, number 10. And we can see production in black, billion kilowatt hours, and also consumption in gray, again, billion kilowatt hours. Now, let's look at the production. For China, it's a lot. It's more than its consumption. The same goes to United States, Russia, Japan, India, Canada, France, Brazil, and Korea. So the only country that has more consumption than production is Germany. So this is something that stands out and we can mention in the overview and also in our body paragraphs. And also Russia, if you look at it more closely, you'll see that the production and consumption is nearly equal or the same. So this is something that I will also mention. So the highest, we have China, the United States, and then we have another category, Russia, Japan, India, and then the countries with the least amounts of production and consumption. In order to organize your answers, it's better to group them, right? So we need to put some of these countries together and write them in separate paragraphs to make it easier to organize our answer. Now, I will put China and the United States together as they have the highest amounts. Then I'll put Russia, Japan, India together. I will write them in a separate paragraph. Canada, France, Brazil, and Korea in a separate paragraph. And I'll also add Germany to this paragraph at the end of my third paragraph, because if I write it separately, that will be just one line. So it's better to keep the paragraphs of the same size, not one too long and one too short. So one paragraph, our introduction, one paragraph on China and the United States, one paragraph on Russia, Japan, India, one on Canada, France, and the rest of the countries. All right, it's time to write, and the first thing we write as usual is the paraphrase. This is my paraphrase. The bar chart illustrates variations in electricity production and consumption across the top 10 countries. So the first change, I deleted below because there is nothing below our writing. Instead of shows, I used illustrates. You can use other verbs like demonstrates, displays, and so on. And I added the word variations, which means differences, to show that there are different numbers. I changed the word order here. Instead of the production and consumption of electricity, I used electricity production and consumption. And I also added the word across the top 10 countries. All right, let's write the overview. So remember we said that for the overview, we can say most countries had more production than consumption, which is correct. And also to make it more specific, we can add Germany to the overview. So overall, most countries produce more electricity than they consume. Now I add Germany, with Germany being a notable exception. All right, let's get to the details. I'll start with China and the United States. China and the United States stand out as the top producers and consumers. Now I need to give details. With China leading with a production of 5,398 billion kilowatt hours and a consumption of 5,322 billion kilowatt hours. Now I need to mention the United States. While the United States follows with 4,099 billion kilowatt hours produced and 3,866 billion kilowatt hours consumed. So notice that I changed the part of speech of production and consumption to producer and consumer, and also produced and consumed. Remember, you don't have to write a synonym for every single word. Changing the part of speech would be also a great way to paraphrase, as in this case, production, producer, produced. Now it's time to get to the second group. Russia, Japan, and India follow with significantly lower figures compared to China and the United States. Now I need to mention the details. Russia's power output and usage are nearly equal at 1,057 billion kilowatt hours and 1,038 billion kilowatt hours respectively. So here instead of electricity, I used power, and instead of production, output, and instead of consumption, usage. So I used synonyms here. Now Japan. Japan generates 936.2 billion kilowatt hours and uses 856.7 billion kilowatt hours. Now India. While India produces 871 billion kilowatt hours and consumes 698.8 billion kilowatt hours. Now we get to the last group: Canada, France, Brazil, Korea, and also Germany. Canada, France, Brazil, and South Korea show comparable levels with generation exceeding usage. So I gave a brief introduction what happens in this group. Now I need to get to the details. But remember, we said we should summarize, right? So instead of mentioning all of these numbers one by one for the last group, I just put them together and use the word ranges from or ranges between. These countries' electricity production ranges from 485.1 billion kilowatt hours to 618.9 billion kilowatt hours, while consumption ranges between 449.5 billion kilowatt hours and 499.9 billion kilowatt hours. Now, Germany, the last country, which is different. Germany differs by using more power than it produces, with 582.5 and 526.6 billion kilowatt hours, respectively. All right, now let's talk about some of the useful words I used in this essay. The first word, illustrate, to show, variation, a difference or change in something, notable, important or worth noticing, exception, something that does not follow the usual rule or pattern, in this case, Germany. Now, the first body paragraph. Stand out, to be very noticeable or easy to see. Leading with, being first or having the highest amount of something. Follows with, coming next after something else, having the next highest amount of something. Significantly, by a large or important amount. Figure, a number or amount. Compared to look at two or more things to see how they're similar or different. Power, energy, especially electricity, used to do work. Output, the amount of something that is produced. Usage, the amount of something that is used. Nearly, almost, but not quite. Equal, the same in amount. Respectively, in the same order as previously mentioned. And generates, to make or produce something like electricity. And the last paragraph, comparable levels, similar amounts or quantities. Exceed, to be more than something else. Range from or between, to have amounts or numbers within certain limits from one number to another. And differ, which is a verb, to be different from something else. All right, I wrote 182 words for this essay and I organized it in 4 paragraphs. In the first one, I simply paraphrased and wrote my overview. In my first body paragraph, I described Group 1, China and the United States. In the second one, I described the second group and I mentioned the details. And I did the same for the last group, Canada, France, Brazil, South Korea, and also Germany, and also mentioned the details. Remember, you don't write any numbers or details in the overview, but you have to mention the details in the body paragraphs. And when possible, put them together and group them and don't mention them one by one. All right, hope you found it useful. Have a nice day.